History is often written in blood and war, but sometimes it is written in movements that defy all human reason. Imagine walking down a street and seeing someone dancing, not out of joy, but with a face twisted in exhaustion and agony. Now imagine that person cannot stop. They dance until their feet bleed, until their hearts fail, and until they drop dead. This isn't a dark fairy tale or a scene from a horror movie. This actually happened in the summer of 1518 in the city of Strasbourg. It is known as the Dancing Plague, one of the most bizarre and terrifying medical mysteries in the history of the world. In the unknown archive today, we step back into the Middle Ages to witness a city consumed by a rhythm that no one could hear. It all began with a single woman named Frau Troffea. On a hot July day, she stepped into a narrow street and began to dance. There was no music. There was no festival. She simply began to twist, hop, and shake with an intensity that disturbed those who watched. Her husband begged her to stop. Her neighbors watched in confusion, but Frau Troffea continued for hours, her face blank and her eyes vacant. Night fell, and she was still dancing. When the sun rose the next morning, she was still at it, her clothes soaked in sweat. By the end of the week, 34 more people had joined her. They were all dancing with the same frantic, uncontrollable energy. Within a month, the number grew to 400. The streets of Strasbourg were filled with hundreds of people leaping and twirling. This was not a celebration. Witnesses described the scene as a nightmare. The dancers were screaming for mercy, begging for their limbs to stop moving. Their feet were worn down to the bone. Their shoes were shredded. Yet, like puppets on invisible strings, they kept moving. The local authorities and physicians were baffled. In the 16th century, the world was ruled by superstition and limited medical knowledge. They consulted the most prominent doctors of the time. The verdict was strange. They claimed the dancers were suffering from hot blood. Their cure was even stranger. Instead of bleeding the patients or ordering them to rest, the city council decided that the dancers needed to dance more. They believed that if the people could just dance it out of their systems, the plague would end. To facilitate this, the city built a massive wooden stage in the center of the town. They even hired professional musicians and strongmen. The musicians played loud, upbeat tunes, and the strongmen were paid to hold up the dancers as they began to collapse from exhaustion. This was a catastrophic mistake. The music and the stage only served to encourage more people to join the madness. Soon the city was losing up to 15 people a day to heart attacks, strokes, and sheer physical exhaustion. The atmosphere of Strasbourg was no longer that of a thriving city. It was a theater of the dead, filled with the sound of drums and rhythmic thumping. People were falling dead on the stage, their bodies dragged away while others took their places in the deadly circle. As the deaths mounted, the authorities realized their mistake. They banned music, closed the stages, and declared dancing a sin. The dancers were eventually carted off to a mountain shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, where they were given red shoes and led in ritual prayers. Slowly the dancing stopped. The survivors were left broken, and the city of Strasbourg was left with a haunting question. Why? For centuries, historians and scientists have tried to solve the mystery of what caused the 1518 dancing plague. The first major theory is ergotism, a type of mass poisoning caused by a fungus that grows on damp rye bread. Ergot contains chemical compounds similar to LSD. When consumed, it can cause vivid hallucinations, tremors, and violent muscle spasms. Could the entire city have been tripping on moldy bread, caught in a mass psychedelic trance? Many scientists doubt this. While ergot causes spasms, it also restricts blood flow to the limbs. It would be physically impossible to dance for days on ergot. Furthermore, ergotism usually makes people extremely ill, not capable of high-intensity aerobic exercise. This leads us to the second, and perhaps more likely, theory: mass psychogenic illness or mass hysteria. The year 1518 was a time of extreme stress and suffering for the people of Strasbourg. They were dealing with famine, devastating disease outbreaks like syphilis and smallpox, and the constant fear of religious judgment. Psychological experts believe that under extreme stress, the human mind can manifest physical symptoms as a coping mechanism. The legend of Saint Vitus, a saint believed to have the power to curse people with a dancing plague, was well known in the region. If a population believes a curse is real, their brains can literally trigger the body to act out that curse through the power of suggestion. It was a psychic contagion. One person began to dance due to a breakdown, and others, overwhelmed by fear and stress, followed suit. Their brains were effectively hijacked by a collective delusion, forcing their bodies to keep moving until they broke. But how can hundreds of people share the exact same physical symptom at the exact same time? The Unknown Archive looks at modern examples of mass hysteria, from the Tanganyika laughter epidemic to the leaky windshield mystery. The human mind is incredibly susceptible to the behavior of the group. We are social animals, and our nervous systems can sync up in terrifying ways. Some historians point to a more sinister possibility. Could it have been a hidden religious cult or a ritual that spiraled out of control? There are records of dancing cults throughout the Middle Ages, groups that used rhythmic movement to achieve a state of religious ecstasy. But the accounts from 1518 don't mention cults. They mention ordinary people who were terrified of their own feet. The physical toll of the dancing plague is hard to imagine in our modern, sedentary world. To dance for days without food or water requires a level of adrenaline that usually only occurs in life or death situations. The victims were essentially in a fight or flight mode that lasted for weeks, eventually burning out their internal organs. The red shoes provided at the St. Vitus shrine are a symbolic detail that has survived in folklore and fairy tales, like Hans Christian Andersen's The Red Shoes. In those stories, the shoes are cursed, forcing the wearer to dance until they die, a clear echo of the 1518 event. Strasbourg was not the only place where this happened. Similar outbreaks were recorded in 1374 and throughout the 1400s in Germany and France. But 1518 remains the most documented and the most lethal of all the dancing plagues. It stands as a reminder of how little we truly understand about the connection between the mind and the body. We think of our bodies as machines that we control, but the dancers of Strasbourg were passengers in a vehicle they could no longer steer. What was the trigger for Frau Troffea? Was it a personal tragedy, a neurological malfunction, or a silent protest against a cruel world? We will never know her thoughts, but her first steps launched 1,000 deaths. In the modern age, we still see flashes of mass behavior that resemble the plague, viral trends, mass panics, and digital contagions. Perhaps the rhythm hasn't gone away. It has just changed its form. The records of the City Council of Strasbourg are still preserved, documenting their desperate and failed attempts to stop the dance. They are a testament to human fallibility, showing how even the smartest people of an era can be defeated by a mystery of the mind. Imagine the silence that finally fell over the city when the last dancer was taken away. A silence filled with the memory of thumping feet and the haunting melodies of the hired pipers. The dancing plague of 1518 is a dark chapter in the archive, a story of a city that lost its mind to a beat. It challenges our sense of safety and our belief in our own free will. Could it happen again? Could a psychological spark ignite a physical fire in a modern crowd? Scientists say yes. The conditions for mass hysteria are always present where there is high stress and a shared belief system. The deadly dance is a warning from the past about the power of the collective unconscious. We are all more connected than we realize, and sometimes that connection can lead us to the grave. The stage in Strasbourg is long gone, and the mountain shrine has changed, but the legend remains. It is a story told in whispers, a rhythm that still vibrates through the halls of history. Frau Troffea's dance ended 500 years ago, but the mystery she started is still moving. In the Unknown Archive, we keep the music playing just long enough to understand the darkness. Thank you for joining us. If you feel like dancing today, make sure you can stop.